Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Alexis Badenmare. I'm the political director of the Organic Consumers Association. And today we are broadcasting from OCA's Facebook channel, but also from Regeneration Midwest on Facebook, Regeneration International. We're on YouTube for OCA and RI, and we're also on Rockfin. And our guest today is Wil Crombie. Wil is a farmer and a videographer. And if you've seen any beautiful videos on the Regeneration International page, you know those came from Wil Crombie. Wil, welcome. Can you unmute there?
Yeah. The host muted me. It wasn't my fault, I swear.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here with me, Wil. Our paths have crossed virtually, but we've never had the opportunity to meet in person before. So this is one of the cool things about life online. We get to have these connections.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
So I have met Ray Reynaldo Hazlet Marroquin, and so that's my strongest connection to you. You are Ray's business partner in the TreeRange project. So let's start there because I have some familiarity with that. Tell us what TreeRange is.
TreeRange is it's a production model based, regenerative poultry production model where we're raising poultry and raising chickens under forested canopies, whether that be a pre-existing forested canopy that we're managing into silvopasture, or we're planting tree crops and developing tree crops and growing the forest to become the home of the chickens. So that's a brand that we started that we're selling our chicken under, TreeRange. Nicely, well put. It is what it says. We're raising chickens under trees, and it's a beautiful regenerative model that is much needed in this industrial approach to meat production today. I think lots of farmers are getting their animals back on the land, and that's something that we lost in the last few decades, is pushing our animal operations into barns and into confinement operations. But really, the cows and the sheep and the pigs and the chickens, they belong outside, and chickens are, if you look at their evolutionary footprint, are from the jungle. So they deserve a forest, and that's what our brand is doing, and that's what these production systems are doing. And you mentioned Reynaldo Hazlet Marroquin. Well, he is sort of the keeper and the systems designer of where some of this indigenous wisdom came from. So he's been developing the brand, and my family's land, the organic compound, is one of the very first full-scale production sites that we started building the brand on. So I've been lucky to be a part of that partnership, building the brand, and then also reforesting my family's land and working with so many community members and business partners on the joy of watching a forest grow up. Where I grew up watching corn grow in those fields. So it's a really exciting brand. It's really exciting to be a part of the movement of growing that brand and being one of the farmers. My wife and I and the family here tends to that story and tends to the chickens here. We call ourselves chicken tenders. So that's what we're up to here at the organic compound and with TreeRange. And there's so many different layers to this story, but we're pushing forward every day to try and bring better regenerative systems into the farming sphere, which I'm here in Minnesota, and there's a lot of polluted lands. There's a lot of over monocultures, just year after year of corn with chemical-based applications, tillage-based applications, and confinement operations. And the industry really, and production models really drove farming in that direction, and rural communities and small farms crumbled because of it. So we're sort of trying to create that education and that story collectively with Regeneration International, with Regeneration Midwest, and Regeneration Mid started quite a few years ago. We launched at Moses, and that was between Organic Consumers Association and Regeneration International and the work that Rehi and I and friends were doing, we saw this need to really highlight the Midwest and really create a vessel for regenerative agriculture to become, widespread. So that's where Regeneration Midwest came into play. Was we really just wanted to tell these people's stories. And now here I am talking to you, and I somehow in the last 6 or 7 years I've become one of the stories. So I'm really honored to share it with you.
Well, it is a great story. I really do love what you and Rehi do. And one of the interesting things that piqued my curiosity that you just said is that chickens are actually jungle animals, and that what Rehi developed was a form of indigenous, is a follow-up to a form of indigenous agriculture that's been practiced for perhaps millennia. What can you tell us about the origins of this system?
Well, how far back do I go in answering that question, right? So the Earth was formed. It was a very dry, hot crust. No, I won't go that far back. Basically, that'd be, some of that is the story of indigenous wisdom. Some of that is the story of, evolution of birds in forest. And what's really pushed it forward into our hearts and minds today is the work of Reginaldo. And he was raised in Guatemala, and so he sort of thrived and survived off of raising chickens, and it's very, very jungly in Guatemala. So it just, in his journey of learning about business and learning about farming, and in his migration here to Minnesota, he held on to that story, and he held on to he remembered the chicken in the forest, and in his efforts to help underserved communities, working with the Latino community, and working with people in Minnesota, starting gardens and looking for ways to create an entry for farmers and to create less barriers for underserved populations, beginning farmers. He looked to the chicken again. He carried that wisdom in his pocket through his lifetime, and has over the last few decades been developing that system and researching the best types of chickens that are going to actually graze these environments, as opposed to what the industry is growing in confinement. That's not the same bird that it was 1,000 years ago. The chickens have made their way around the world. They're on every continent, and over time we've developed different breeds, and so now we need to sort of work backwards to get to the best breeds that can range in forest again. So that's a little bit of a backstory, and it's a longer story, especially if it was coming from Rehi, but that gives you a gist of working with him is where it came from in my world, and working with the communities here in Minnesota, and then starting to ripple out into other communities and sharing that knowledge. I'm really honored and happy to be a part of it.
So I'm sure there will be people listening who do raise chickens and do want to know what you guys think the best breed is for these foraging pasture-based systems.
Yeah. We use Freedom Rangers. So that's the type of breed that we're working with. And we've been doing it on my family's land for 5 years, raising chickens this way. And they're just, they've worked really great. They range all the way out. We have acre and a half is what they're moving through. They're 0.75 acre paddocks. And they go hundreds of feet out into the paddocks, and by the end of the rotation, they graze the whole thing, and then we switch them over to the second part, and they're healthy and happy, and they're moving around for sure. So, whatever research Rehi did in years past with all the different breeds that he worked with, he's come to the conclusion that Freedom Rangers is a viable option for now, at least. Who knows what could happen in the future?
Well, it's a business model that really makes sense. Certainly, as a climate activist, my interest in regenerative agriculture was this very real process of photosynthesis that draws carbon out of the atmosphere, carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and
Wow.
pulls it into the soil, where it is trapped in the soil as stable carbon. So it's a climate change solution. But what ends up happening to me when I go to farming conferences and hear farmers talk about this, I end up getting really turned on about the economics of these
Mhm.
systems, because really I think that's the best way to sell it to a fellow farmer is, look, you can make money on a small amount of land doing this system. I've seen I think there was a study that was done by a university in Minnesota about the amount of land, the amount of chickens, and the amount of money that you can make in this system. It's incredibly intensive. I guess one of the stories I heard Rahi tell about this is that it was so intensive that people who considered themselves regenerative chicken farmers thought it couldn't possibly be regenerative with that many chickens. But
Wow.
I think that that's could be seen as a symbol or a marker by which you could judge regenerative. That it's so regenerative that the land can support many more animals than it can through a system that's less regenerative. And certainly, I've seen that at play with beef cattle, where you can, if you adopt a regenerative, holistic management program, you can get actually more animals on the land, produce more beef, because you're using that land well and the land is supporting more animals. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that it is our job to question that, right? It is our job to question what is actually regenerative and where does that term come from? What are the origins of agriculture and what is the best way to raise livestock and what is the best, tree crops or management practices for the health of the earth, for the health of people, and also for farmers to make a profit. So it only takes 10 weeks to raise a flock, right? So in 10 weeks, you can get a return on your investment. So that's why chickens are such a great instant cash flow for an entry point for farmers, as opposed to raising cattle. It may take a few years, depending on what kind of breeds you're growing and how you're raising them. So it's we, as we started back in, sorry, am I glitching? I see the screen sort of timed
You
out.
did for a minute. You can repeat yourself, that last sentence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, it's it's I'm sort of losing the question, but in essence, yeah, we need to push our limits with our production so that way we can feed the world and so that way we can profit. But we shouldn't cut corners. We shouldn't create degenerative systems in search of profits or in search of more production, and which is what led us to this problem, which is what led us to these issues is go big or go home, grow your corn fence row to fence row, plow everything under, and pack the animals into the barns is what led us to this point. So that's why I said we should be questioning those things and farmers should be hesitant. But I think with TreeRange and with the regenerative poultry production model, we've done years and years of research and we've really refined it and boiled it down to, at least here in our climate and what I've seen over the last 5 years raising them on my family's land, is like, oh, it's perfect. It's so awesome watching them graze that 1.5 acres and watching them move through that and just timing it just perfect. There's so much joy in just nailing that rotation and getting it dialed in and having healthy animals. And there's so much happiness that can come from providing that quality of a product to the consumers. So all that to also say that every land is different, so whether you're in Minnesota or you're in Mexico or you're in Ohio, or wherever you are, the regenerative factor of say a farmer's piece of land is going to be different on each piece of land, with the different types of tree crops, the different grasses that you're growing, all the different stories are going to react differently. So it may take a little bit of experimentation, but I like to think that all farms are research sites. Every farmer is a researcher. So it's up to us to view ourselves as researchers and to always adapt and change our practices to what the earth is telling us. We've got a lot of science, and we've got a lot of history of documentation of what has worked in the past, and that's important for us to reference, but it's also important for us to be on the ground. If it's raining out, go out to your fields and see where the water is flowing. If that tree looks sad, but the ones down further in the row are happy, why are those trees happier than the ones down here? And that's just what we do as farmers. We're always observing, and we're always just looking into our fields and at our livestock and questioning, how can we make this better? How can we make it better for the earth? How can we make it better for the animals or the trees or the crops? And at the end of the day, how can we make a profit as well and spread that profit with the community?
Well, one of the neat things about the TreeRange system that you all do is that you've got one product that's going to come to market in a matter of months, the broilers. Or the layers. You can do it with layers too.
Yep.
And then you have some things that you're planting, maybe even for the next generation.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time on your website, The Organic Compound, and I think that's organiccompoundmn.org, right?
Organiccompound.org.
Okay,
Yep.
organiccompound.org. Oh, here it is on the screen now.
That's the old website. And then Organic Compound came up available, and I was like, I had to scoop it up, because I think a decade ago when I bought organiccompoundmn.org, the Organic Compound wasn't available. But we got it now.
Well, it's a beautiful site filled with gorgeous videos, including aerial videos of your farm. And that you've got a nice series of 6 really super short videos. They're a minute long, and they describe the evolution of your farm since 2012, right?
Yeah, or 11. Yeah, it's been a while. I think next year is our 10th year in calling it the Organic Compound and hosting events and developing the land here. But I was actually raised here, so
nice.
It's been longer than that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I notice you're incorporating into this system is oak trees.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be a while. So how are oak trees going to fit in to your system?
And don't call it my system, right? Because it's the Earth system. And so I like to look at where we are in southern Minnesota. We're really close to the Near Strand Big Woods. And the Big Woods used to be a lot bigger, right? There used to be so much more land mass here covered in these forests. So we're just looking at the indigenous forest canopies and taking away from that what we will, thinking to ourselves, okay, what did this used to look like before we ripped it all down to build our cities and plant our crops, and what was working for people of the past, and what can work for the people of the future. And considering climate change, considering all the different variables that go into farming, considering what we can do with those tree crops. But to answer your question, oaks in general, they're a part of that savanna that was once here in Minnesota. And, functionally, they can feed the wildlife, they can feed the livestock, they can be grown for timber and firewood. And that's what we did. We planted them pretty dense, like 5 feet apart. timber stand, oak timber stand, but they're going to provide shade for the livestock. They're going to provide a little bit of windbreak and protection for the farm here, and they're going to serve a lot of purposes. And you know, maybe not, like you said, maybe not in my lifetime. Maybe it's like my great grandkids are going to build a house with that wood or heat their homes with that wood. But that's not stopping us from planting them today, because, and we can do that because we can, you know, raise other crops. We have 40 plus acres. There's probably 60 some acres here of land to work with. And we've got hazelnut and elderberry are the real cash crops that we're focusing on, besides the oaks, sugar maples, basswood, chestnuts, and some of those overstories that we have planted here. So the chickens and the hazelnuts and the elderberries, and then we have 2,000 asparagus planted in one of the alleys. So we can harvest a lot of asparagus. The hazelnuts are coming on strong. They're in year 4 or 5. And elderberries, we're just sort of really getting those better established each year. But those two crops, hazelnut and elderberries, are kind of the up and coming rock stars of Midwest agriculture. And there's a lot of people doing great work to promote them, develop them, and, you know, find the best means of production, the best varieties, and find all the ways to process and create products out of those. And they're really cool. They're really cool tree crops. Like, there's so much history and folklore that goes along with them as well. Elderberries and hazelnuts. Like, if you look at some of the ancient wisdom, that the stories that come with them, they're really, really great stories, and they're really connected to a lot of different cultures. So I like that aspect too. I like to think about all the folklore that comes along with them. But at the end of the day, we need to make some money, and we need to run a farm here. So it can't just all be like, oh, you know, let's plant what Minnesota used to look like. No, we need to think about how we can, you know, provide for people food, fiber, fuel, and how we can make a living ourselves today. Think about the future generations always, but how can we provide for ourselves today? So that's why we honed in on those crops. But we're standing in the shadow, promoting those and bringing those forward as well. So hats off to all the forefathers and foremothers of these crops.
So what is your favorite elderberry story? Or if you can't think of an elderberry story now, your favorite tree story, your favorite folklore story about that you've learned about the crops that you plant on your farm?
Story time. Okay. The elderberry is interesting because they say don't burn it. Like, don't burn the elderberry, because there's something to do with, I'm going to butcher this one. You know, I haven't really looked into the elderberry one in a while, but it's taboo to burn it because something will happen to you. I don't know. But it probably is based on some sort of science as well. Like, it's toxic if you burn it, right? But the hazelnut has a really good, I think it's an Irish folklore, something to do with the salmon of knowledge, and the salmon would eat the hazelnuts. And I don't know if I want to go into the full story right now, but just look up hazelnut, salmon of knowledge, read it for yourself, get back to me with some better elderberry folklore examples. Let's find a real storyteller to come in and do a live for Regeneration Midwest and tell the folklore of these crops. It's important.
I guess I'm going to start letting my guests know in advance that I want a good folkloric story involving salmon, hazelnut, an elderberry or
Any,
another,
yeah.
another plant of choice.
Oak probably has several. Yeah.
I think Corey Melby, my coworker, who's our producer, he might be putting things in the chat here on Facebook, links to good stories about salmon and elderberry, hazelnut.
I hope so.
So I have seen the TreeRange system in person, in the flesh, in Mexico at the Via Organica farm near San Miguel del Allende. And one of the cool things about what it looked like, they were doing layers. No, sorry, yeah, layers.
Yep.
And the chickens are like, they want to stay pretty close to their feed, right? So they've got really delicious sprouted grains, and the chickens are digging those. But they get out into the rows of sunflowers and corn, and I think they were doing like a Three Sisters type planting there for the chickens to roam around in. And the chickens would go mostly into the whole enclosure, but they didn't get all the way out to the very corners. And so the corn that was closest to where the chickens like to hang out, where their roosts were, where they could get shade and water, the corn there was a mile high. And the corn in those nether regions of the field were stubby by comparison. The ones out by the fence that the chickens didn't visit all that often were real stubby. And that's just a simple observation, but it adds to the value of the chicken in your system, because the chicken, I guess, is a free source of fertilizer. So how is this working for what you do on your farm?
Yeah, that's great that you visited that site. I've been there myself too, and that is a whole, that, establishing that ground for tree crop production or vegetable production, or raising livestock on pasture, is a whole nother challenge compared to up here in Minnesota. Like, we have very fertile land, especially on my family's land. It was feet of black topsoil, which would make many people in the southern hemisphere very jealous, and are all over. We're just really lucky here in Minnesota. So getting things to grow and regenerate has been relatively easy for us in our paddocks. And of course we have the winters, so there's like a dead stop to the continual growth of the paddocks, and we only raise we do meat production, so we also stop our production at the end of the year, so that the paddocks, they have a lot of rest time as well, so they're not always continually getting that pressure from the animals. And we focus mostly on the tree crops, but we have raised some of those overstory annuals, sunflower and corn, sorghum, and things like that. And we've created a little annual overstory canopy for sure. And we've sprouted a lot of grain in our paddock as well for the chickens to forage. And I think that's something unique about this system is, and you probably saw it down in Mexico, it's like you get out there and you make sure that ground is covered. If there is anywhere that these chickens are scratching down to bare earth, like, you keep it covered. And that's part of the soil health practices, like keep your soil covered, and it won't get dry and hot, and the air and the water won't be able to blow it away or wash it away. And that's important as part of like cover crop rotations outside of animal production. Is soil health is essential to keep living roots in the ground and keep the ground covered. So it mostly only happens for us like right outside our doors and maybe underneath some of the trees, where we have to spread some straw or spread some grain. But like you observed in Mexico, is like up front where those really rich, fertile spots where they were just coming in and out, or where they, didn't maybe range as far, is where you can find a lot of that fertility. And, yeah, and we're putting down a lot of straw too, and wood chips under the tree crops. So it's like we're constantly trying to push as get this as regenerative as possible and to build that soil consistently every single year. And like me personally, like I get a kick out of it. Like I probably put too much straw down and too much mulch, but I want to take this as far as possible. I want to spread as much grain as possible, and I want those chickens to be out there foraging, and I want that soil to be building, and it all works in great symbiosis. They're not only just giving us their manure, but they're also doing the weed management underneath those trees, the pest management, so they're finding the little bugs that may be a problem to the hazelnuts or the elderberries, like spotted wing Drosophila for the elderberry, or some of the I think the little buggers that bore into the hazelnuts, like they're finding them and breaking that pest cycle. So that's one beauty of silvopasture, is your livestock have the ability to help you break those pest cycles, give manure and nutrients, and do the mowing for you, move you away from fossil fuels. Like we don't need to be out mowing large acreage. The reason that we had savannas in the first place were because of fire, and because of those species sort of evolved that way, but also because we had huge masses of herbivores moving through the land, creating these savannas that now I think is visually imprinted in us as humans. That's why we want nice mowed lawns, because it's like it's a part of our DNA, wanting to see that perfect lawn and those trees lined up, and although some of that perfection has got us in a little bit of trouble, and we've sort of lost the meaning, it's still ingrained in us, and we still desire that savanna, and it can be a very beneficial thing for livestock and the tree crops in general.
So there is one issue I have with the TreeRange system, and it's that it's not, at least on your little farm, like one reason why it's really attractive and why I think about it all the time. I only have a half acre that my house is on, but it's enough room to do chickens, and it really makes sense to grow perennials for your chickens to hang out in, and it's just a real simple system. But one of the disadvantages to the system is that you have to have a lot of grain for your chickens. So so that's not something you control on your own farm. So you have to keep that in mind when you put together your system, that you plan for where you get your grain, and that has to, factor into your decision making. So how do you work that out on your own farm?
And I'm kind of guessing what you said, because you sort of froze up for a second there. But did you say that it was dependent on grain production, or what? Can you just repeat it? Yes. Okay. We're sourcing organic, and we're trying our best to work with local producers, milling it ourselves. The fact that we're feeding sprouted grain from local organic producers is a step in the right direction as well. So, when you sprout grain, when you feed an animal a whole grain, and yes, we're sort of locked into feeding grain in poultry production. There are other ways to grow food for poultry. Some people are working with like black fly larvae, and also what we're doing in our paddocks, like growing comfrey and some of the other forages that they're finding, is offsetting that feed. Offsetting that feed cost and offsetting the amount of feed that we need to input. Just the fact that they're out there grazing the comfrey, or finding the bugs, or eating the blades of grass and the clovers that are out in the paddock, is reducing the amount of poultry feed that we need as an input. But as a standard, we should at least be working with organic grain producers. And if you're hip to it, that not all organic production is necessarily regenerative. This is true, right? But at least we're not relying on chemical production, and at least those farmers are moving into the better direction. And most of them are doing cover crops and rotations, and they are actively pursuing a better means of agriculture and production. So yeah, we're tied into grain production with poultry production. It's not like cattle where we can lifetime graze them, 100% graze them. We'd be doing the chickens a disservice if we did that. But they're a low impact animal. They grow quick. So in 10 weeks, we have a bird, and that can be on your table. So they take a considerable amount of grain for production, and we should factor that into when we're deciding whether or not something is regenerative. We should think about where that grain is coming from, who the producers are, and how can we best locally source, and who are the best producers of that grain, and how can we offset it.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, but there are questions now in our chat, and I didn't want to lose them as the feed goes along. So there's one question here: do chickens pose any kind of threat to native wild poultry, such as wild turkey, ruffled grouse, spruce grouse, sharp-tailed grouse, greater prairie chicken, ring-necked pheasant? This person knows a lot about wild birds. What things can be done to mitigate risks to wildlife?
So take the land that we're on as an example. We have 2 production units, right? So that's 6 acres. So it's not a lot of acreage that we're producing the poultry on, but we have many times that amount of acreage that we've converted from what was once monoculture, the way that the farmers used this land previous to us, to native prairies and grasses. And then also as I'm out there mowing, I'm also thinking about rotational mowing, and not just taking everything down, because we have to manage these tree crops. We have to mow alongside of them and around them so that they can develop into a mature tree crop. But we don't have to mow the whole farm every month or something. We can decide to let areas rest and create those habitat zones. And then we can also just straight up have non-production zones that are just grassland. We have a 3-acre plot that we planted into some wildflowers and some prairie grasses, and then we have several buffer strips that we don't touch. There's one of them's along a creek. We've got a couple of different forests on the land. So it's far from like a row crop production where everything is tilled and everything is mowed and everything is just either it's black or it's green and it's nothing for the wildlife. It's a new kind of farm where we're raising livestock integrated into tree crop production. And when you do that, there's so much opportunity for wildlife to thrive as compared to some of the more conventional approaches. What do we have any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, there's
I hope that
question.
Thank you, Nancy, for caring for the grouse and holding the turkey in your heart, because that's important for sure. We need to create wildlife corridors, and that's what these types of farms are doing. We're connecting land masses again that aren't just broken up by wall-to-wall corn.
Yay, thank you, Nancy. And Nancy also had another good question about whether pheasants could be incorporated into these types of situations. Could we go beyond the chicken and find birds that are wildish but also provide food sources for humans?
Yeah, definitely. And so for us, TreeRange, we focused on chicken because it's a marketable product, right? and we've developed, the system based on chicken, but the same principles could definitely be applied to pheasants. You just need to do thousands of hours of research, and decades of R&D to like get to the point where we are with our TreeRange, our production model. Or you could just take what we've learned and then attempt to try it with different types of birds. There are people that are experimenting with turkeys. I haven't heard of anybody experimenting with pheasant though, but that would be, I challenge someone out there that's watching this to take these silvopasture based principles, this indigenous wisdom, and look at it through the eyes of a pheasant as opposed to a chicken, and see what you can come up with.
Well, Jamie also has a good question. How many other operations like yours do you know of in the United States? And so this is a good time to mention the Savannah Institute, because you work part-time as a communications person for Savannah Institute. Tell us about Savannah Institute and that network. And then don't let me forget to plug the regenerative farm map.
Yeah. Okay. So how many operations like this are there? I'll start with the producers for the TreeRange brand. There are currently 5 different farms producing for our brand, and we're all centrally located in Minnesota. We have a processing facility in northeastern Iowa. So we're trying to work with farmers that are in this drift list region, which ripples out towards Wisconsin, and that's really where Savannah Institute is based out of Madison, Wisconsin. But they've got their map is the Midwest. Widespread agroforestry in the Midwest is what their mission is. So at Savannah Institute, we are working with farmers that have this type of mindset. That are interested in agroforestry practices. And agroforestry is not just silvopasture. It's not just raising animals under tree crops. It could also be forest farming, raising mushroom production under canopies, or even foraging for things like morel mushrooms. I'm not going to tell you where to look, because those are my spots, but that's forest farming when you're either purposefully or under forest canopies. And there's also row crop. So there's plenty of row crop farmers that are raising, whether it's corn or beans or even other types of vegetable production amongst tree crops. So adding a windbreak, or adding a row of tree crops along a waterway or something like that within vegetable production. That's alley cropping. And also, riparian buffers and windbreaks. These are all agroforestry-based practices that Savannah Institute is they're a research organization, and educating farmers, connecting farmers to those resources, connecting farmers to each other, and really being on the forefront of agroforestry in the Midwest. So definitely check out Savannah Institute. That's savannahinstitute.org. Looks like Corey's already way ahead of me, throwing that into the chat. There's some online education. There's an upcoming North American Agroforestry Conference. So if you're looking for an opportunity to link up with other people who are doing this in North America in general, and I believe Ronnie Cummings from the Organic Consumers Association is going to be doing a talk at that conference. So you can visit agroforestry2021.com and register for that conference. And it's about climate drawdown. It's about creating these systems with climate change in mind, and carbon drawdown. Sorry, excuse me. So check out Savannah Institute, check out the North American Agroforestry Conference, and that is my long answer to how many people have operations like ours. I don't know. Not enough. That's my answer. Not enough people are doing this. So we need brands like TreeRange and organizations like Savannah Institute, promoting these types of brands and opportunities.
So, Wil, I want to ask you a little bit more about this huge step forward for TreeRange to have its own processing facility. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the cool things about chickens is you can process them yourself. I helped a local farmer process turkeys one year for Thanksgiving, and it's a really hands-on process, and it's something that you can do. It's not like, I mean, people slaughtered buffaloes too, so these things weren't outside of the human experience, but it is really important if you're going to operate on the scale that you all operate. Try to create to be able to make a living raising chickens. It's super important to have a processing plant. So how did you guys get to that point? And congratulations, by the way, because I know that's a huge deal.
Yeah, thank you. And that's one of the largest barriers of entry to getting into this type of farming is smaller production. And the industry really drove it that way. The scale of production in the industrial poultry systems is well beyond the type of production that we as individuals on farms that want to do it regeneratively even want to touch. So that means that those processing facilities aren't available to us. And a lot of these smaller processing facilities are going out of business because of it. So it's really hard to find a processing facility that fits your needs. It's really hard to find one that's even within a few hours of you. And oftentimes you can only get state certified, or, they don't have organic, or they don't have air chilled, or, there's a lot of pieces that we've been going after as TreeRange so that we can provide the best product to our customers. And we just couldn't find the reliability. We couldn't find the proximity. We couldn't find all of the we weren't checking off all of the boxes that we needed to create the best product. So Ray is the president of Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, and he put together a grant, and through that grant and through just coming across this processing facility at the right time and finding the right partners to make it happen, acquired this processing facility. And now him and the team and one of our other business partners, Tony Wils, are leading opening this processing facility. And that is going to happen next month, around this time next month, or maybe it's in July. It's very soon that we'll be opening this processing facility. So I think if you're in the Stacyville, Iowa area, even if you're not a TreeRange producer but you're a small poultry producer, you should go to regenerativeagriculturealliance.org or reach out to Tony Wils at the Alliance, and he's got a form that you can fill out, because we're really interested in helping other small farmers, not just people that are producing using regenerative poultry production practices, but any kind of small farmer that is raising chickens on their farm that is looking for a processing facility, because we know how rare it is and how hard it is to find the right facility that can get USDA certified, that can have organic certification and has air chilled and all of these other requirements. So that's a little bit of the story of how we acquired the processing facility and how important and how amazing it is that we can have that space for you all and for our brand. But it's not enough. We need facilities like this on every corner. Every farming community needs to have someone that they can look to so that they can process their birds and take them to the markets. But also, like you said, people can process on farm and sell direct, but sometimes that could be limiting for, say, a brand that wants to grow a truly regenerative product in the marketplace, where we've been sort of pushed out. The small brands have been pushed out by the industrial models, the Costcos, and the Tysons and all these big names that are selling really cheap and really poorly raised animals into the marketplace. It's making it difficult for an industry like this to emerge. So that's why it's important for us to secure these types of facilities and to work together cooperatively as farmers to make sure that these processing facilities survive and that the lights stay on, so that way we can continue to work with these animals, to work with the land and work with our bodies and bring back our communities, our small farming communities.
Well, I encourage everybody to go to the Regenerative Farm Map, and we have a link in the chat for you to find that, and to find a farmer like Wil, because there are more Wils out there, although Wil Crombie is pretty unique. And that's just a segue into wanting to talk a little bit more about you as a person, because I think we would all, especially somebody like me, lives in the suburbs, has farm fantasies, hasn't really done much with it, really benefits from having personal relationships with farmers, to get my food, but also to experience farm life when I can, and to feed that fantasy and to learn more and maybe one day make a leap to producing a significant portion of my own food. So, Wil, you have a really interesting story. You're still real young. You got going with this in your 20s, but the life you had before regenerative agriculture was the only life that I can imagine that's cooler than the regenerative agriculture lifestyle. It was the rock and roll lifestyle. Maybe not rock and roll specific, but you were doing music videos and you were using your talents as a videographer in the music industry. It seems like you were living a very good dream. So why, I don't get it. You're a young guy and you decided to move back to the family farm. I mean, I know because I love regenerative agriculture as much as you do, but tell me your own story about how you decided that was even cooler than what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, I found a way to continue music videos and tour with bands and other small businesses with my video production and my media skills, but it created a sense of purpose with my skills, and that's that my story is sort of reflective of to be a farmer. You really need a variety of skills. You really need to be a Jack or a Jill of all trades. And there's always going to be a way that you can plug in your skill set. So for me as a marketer, as a filmmaker, I found a way to plug in my skill set, and I found a passion for farming, and that that came from a deep longing to be on my family's land. I was raised here. My brothers and sisters played in this yard and in that forest, and I've been watching these fields my entire life. My parents live next door in the home that my mother was raised in. It doesn't get any better. And I'm really blessed to be able to say those words. I know that there's not a lot of people that have ties to family land, or that could even have access to this amount of land to work with. So I want to say, first off, I'm really blessed and I'm really honored to be here working with this land. And I like to tell people that that want to thank me for doing this work, that don't thank me, thank this land, because it's the land that really holds us up. It's the land that really creates these opportunities for us. And us as individuals, it's important for us to create those opportunities for everybody and to help guide and shift and create the opportunities for the land and the animals and the plants. And yeah, I guess I just sort of gained that perspective. Maybe it was from all those lyrics and that music I was listening to at a young age, thinking like a revolutionary, or a poet, or, having that poetic creative mindset has really allowed me to be a better farmer, because I'm looking at the land as a video that I'm producing. I'm looking at it as a work of art. It's not just like straight lines and this crop, that crop, and put this mixture into the tank and spray it. It's a living, breathing work of art. And so maybe being an artist first was an important part of my journey. And no matter who you are or like what skill set you have today, Alexis, you said, what did you say? You're a suburban. Say it again. Who are you, and what are you trying to?
I'm a farm fantasist.
Yeah,
I'm a suburbanite with farm fantasy.
Yep. But you have skills. You have people skills. And that comes in handy with talking with your customers and communicating with people who are going to help you. Building your community around your farm is so important. You have these technological skills, like you're here hosting this live conversation with me, like that skill set is going to connect you with people one day when you get that land and when you get that farm. Because I believe in you, Alexis. You're going to make it happen. We're going to make your farm fantasy come true. And that's kind of the story that I like to share, is that it's so important that all of us get reconnected with our land. We don't have to be farmers. You don't have to be a farmer, Alexis. You can live vicariously through watching the films that I make, or come and visit for some of the farm tours or garden gatherings that we have here. But as individuals, we should at least be getting connected to our farmers, learning their stories and buying their products and supporting, not supporting, degenerative, whatever in the gas station, which is also to say, like, and the reason that I say that I'm so honored to be a part of this land is that I know that not only does not everybody doesn't have access to land, but not everybody even has access to, say, buy a chicken like what we produce. Like they live in food deserts, and they have, the gas station is their grocery store. So how do we create more of these food hubs? How do we support more farmers? How do we grow more community gardens and reconnect the youth to their farms so we actually have a future? And how do we build brands like TreeRange so we actually have a future, so that we can create this access to more people? And that's what agroforestry and this type of livestock production can bring to the table, is it requires more hands on the land. It requires more people engaged with their food, with the land, with the tree crops, with the animals, and can create such a wide range and a diverse of enterprises on just a few acres, that we can really start to engage more people on those lands.
Well, an hour has flown by, and I am so grateful that you're willing to spend this time with us today. We do need to plug a couple of things before we go. You can buy TreeRange chicken online, even if you're not close to Northfield. So what's the website? Maybe we can put it up.
TreeRangeChicken.com.
All right, TreeRangeChicken.com. That's easy.
Yep.
And Wil, you are hosting a very cool event for World Localization Day on Memorial Day on the 31st of this month. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's an important day. I think that's like a week long or a couple week long event that people are taking the opportunity to host local food events. So we said, all right, let's do it. Memorial Day, Let's invite some people out here. We're going to try and do it live again like this, and put together a local foods feast, and just continue to share that story, and to get together and gather around the table and continue to have these types of conversations. So the details aren't out yet. We're just putting it together because that's what we do. Especially here at the Organic Compound, we're just, we got our community garden, and it's just, we're just going for it. Let's get together and grow food and eat food together, and let's make it happen. So those details are yet to come. So I guess I'm not fully ready to answer that question because I don't know where to direct people, but just know it's happening, and we'll probably share something on our website too, organiccompound.org.
Yeah, and everyone can check out the World Localization Day website. There's a page that they have for local food feasts, and you can do your own. And what we're asking folks in the United States to do is to go to the regenerative farm map, find a local farmer. You can trust the ones on our map and get the food you like. Bring your family and your friends together, celebrate the holiday with your loved ones, and by being part of this beautiful regenerative movement. Thank you so much, Wil.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.